Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Hi there, everybody, and welcome to today's Art of Procurement. Well, we made it. Today is actually episode 100. And when I started the Art of Procurement, I honestly had absolutely no idea how far that we would go. You know, the stats on podcasts, they're not great. On average, every podcast only has 7 episodes. So my initial aim was to make it to 20 and see where we go from there. And so here we are at 100, and we're still going strong. And in fact, in September alone, I'm recording this actually the middle of October. So in September, we had a 30% increase in listeners over August. And then in October, where we're trending, we're actually on target for another 15% boost. And a lot of that is in large part down to word of mouth. And so I do really want to thank you for sharing details of the show with your networks, because it's tough to get the word out without any big budgets to spend on promotion, to spend on a team to help promote the show. So if there's one thing that you can do for me as soon as the show finishes today, it would be just tell a peer, check us out. Let's try and continue to grow those numbers so that we can spread the word and get more of our colleagues, more of our peers in procurement kind of listening and learning from each other. Well, before I recorded a single episode, I actually had a list. I just went back to it to look at before I just recorded this bit. And there were 6 people, and there were people that I had on that list that I aspired to have on the show. And there were people within the procurement field whose journey that I'd followed and that I really related to. And that, frankly, I just thought that they would make great guests. And that was back in May 2015. So that's when I started to map out what the Art of Procurement could look like. And one of those 6 people was Mark Perera. And Mark is a long-time procurement entrepreneur. He founded Procurement Leaders and more recently Old Street Labs, where he's also the CEO. And I recently had the opportunity to interview Mark, and so I thought it'd be appropriate that this be our episode 100. And Mark's on a mission to help companies utilize technology to build deeper and more valuable relationships with their suppliers. And if you recognize the name of Old Street Labs from past episodes, I've actually previously interviewed Mark's co-founder, Alex Short, and also their head of research, Jordan Early. And past shows with members of the teams at Old Street Lab, they've focused on value creation. That's something that, I will continue to focus on the Art of Procurement, because I think it's such an important topic with regards to the future of our profession. And so that's where Mark and I focused our conversation today. And at the heart of the discussion, it's how can we focus on generating business value and really start to shift away from a savings perspective. I've talked in past shows about value levers. Today, it's a mindset shift that's required from procurement before we can convince others of the value we can create, because we have to start changing that perception from within the business. That ultimately helps us in changing the way that we're measured. And Mark and I talk about the fact how that really is an iterative process. It's not something that comes overnight. Well, we conducted this interview over a video call, which I think always leads to a more personal discussion, I think, than something that's just over the phone, where it's just a little bit more difficult to pick up on the cues, both myself and the guest. So I really hope you enjoy the episode today as much as I did. Before I kick off the interview, I do want to say a word of thanks for today's sponsor, without who the Art of Procurement just wouldn't be possible. And I'm proud to say that this episode of the Art of Procurement is brought to you by Denali. And Denali is a procurement-focused, technology-agnostic, and highly efficient managed services provider. Denali specializes in providing a variety of different procurement services, including category management, sourcing, contracting, supplier management, and P2P for Global 2000 clients across multiple industries. Denali understands that every client has challenges with their procurement delivery model that are unique to that company. And as a former buyer and provider of procurement managed services, it's always been clear to me that Denali prides themselves on really building solutions that are tailored to solve the individual needs of each client, and not just trying to implement something that's off the shelf. So by partnering with Denali's procurement professionals, your organization can generate more value and faster. So to find out more, I'd just love if you could head over to artofprocurement.com/Denali sourcing. That's artofprocurement.com/Denali sourcing. Well, hi there, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of The Art of Procurement. And I'm delighted to welcome Mark Perera, a serial procurement entrepreneur and most recently the founder of Old Street Labs, to the show. So, Mark, welcome.
Thank you very much, Phil. Philip, it's great to be online and connect with you. And congratulations on the community you've been building around the art of procurement.
It's very much appreciated. It's been a thrill. I can't believe it's less than 12 months since I, with a lot of trepidation, put out that first interview, not having a clue if anybody would listen to it, and it's kind of snowballed from there. So it's been a great journey so far. Excellent.
Well, onwards and upwards, and we're going to carry on tracking your success. I'll be listening on the way to work, your podcast as well.
Thank you. Well, there's very few serial entrepreneurs, I think, in the procurement space. And you've done a ton of different things when I look at it. It's been from publishing, events, marketing intelligence, training. Now you're into relationship management and innovation. Is there like a common thread that pulls all this together, or is it you've seen opportunity, or you have had a passion about some things? What's tied it all together?
Yeah, I think it's solving problems and a passion to do that. I think that's what most people really get passionate about. So I was lucky enough to, in my university days, the internet was just coming about. So this is, I won't say when it was because it will show how old I am. But yeah, no, one of my first jobs was straight into a technology startup, and we were solving problems and we were scaling that business. And you asked what if and more questions to try and do it with speed. And I found the world of procurement. So after a bit of time in corporates and other companies, it's the procurement side, and I found this little niche, and there were problems to be solved, and we started doing events. So similar to the kind of podcast, building a community, launched a magazine. We didn't know what we were doing in launching a magazine, but we seem to have done well. I think we're 10 years into the magazine, and maybe 100 copies, I'm not sure. And then the roll on to awards and these things as well. So it's a challenge of new things. You don't always get all the projects right, but enjoyable. But technology is really my passion. Mm-hmm. So procurement and technology is a great combination for me to do that. And ultimately, that's what I've built out here at Old Street Labs.
Right. And when you started Old Street Labs, and I think it was back in 2012, was it now? It seems, and I remember the time when you did it just as an outsider, and it looked like it was maybe some kind of procurement incubator, for the want of a better word. Was that the intent, or did you really have in mind like a vision of this is what you were going to create, and maybe you're just doing it under cloak and dagger before you were ready to launch your first product?
Yeah, there was a little bit of keeping your head underwater, but it was, we're here to build disruptive technology in the procurement supply chain space, but really to drive competitive advantage to large organizations. Mm-hmm. The technology in the world of kind of in between the unmet needs and opportunities of a large organization and the amazing capabilities of suppliers is fairly transactional at the moment. And we see that with Visible, the first product, and now what we've been doing with Lucid and Manu. It kind of very much around what the rest of the tech world's doing. Salesforce just launched Einstein this week, and obviously IBM's got Watson. So the cognitive world is here. So I think we always knew we were going to be multiple brands, and I've seen the likes of Oracle where it all goes into that white and red logo, and the proposition gets lost. We want to clear about the proposition, and also as you solve one problem, you quite often find other solutions which you spin out as well. So Visible is our core, and then we will have other solutions that we build on top of Lucid. Manu is the first example of that, and we'll continue solving more. But we still focus on our customers. I think we take the Google rule of 70-20-10, and 70% of where our revenue comes through is our main effort and where our resources go to. And then have the 20%, which is new, and then the 10% is that kind of groundbreaking stuff. And I'd say Manu is now sitting on top of that part. But it's exciting, and it keeps us all young and fresh, and get to do cool engineering stuff. And that's what we want to do. We want to wow people and delight people as we grow.
And so Lucid, is that more of an engine then? So I was intrigued because, I know about Visible, and I actually spoke with your co-founder, Alex, back in a previous episode. It's something like 22 or 24, but I'll link up to that in the show notes. And then I saw Lucid maybe over the summer, thought about it of it looks like a product, and now I do a little bit more digging. It looks like it's more the infrastructure, if you will, behind Visible, that maybe you can apply that then to other concepts, other capabilities.
Yes, it's our cognitive engine, really driving, value and more competitive advantage, but it makes other things smarter. So we developed Lucid that you can build other applications, or it can make things, other applications smarter. First instance of that is going to Visible. We just created our first bot. Obviously, the world's going crazy for chat bots at the moment. We've created Manu, and rather than just create one bot, we've actually created Manu as a platform for bots. But yeah, that's fueled by the Lucid API there. So we've got data scientists in the organization, and we're looking to solve problems around those commercial relationships, from risks and opportunities and insight. But then you have to expose that insight. And that can come through smart mobile first web applications like Visible, but also new interfaces like Manu in terms of the chatbot. So yeah, I think Lucid's going to be great, and the more data we put into the kind of neural networks in there, the smarter it gets. Mark, who heads our data science team, he just blows me away, the stuff that we do. It seems like, well, no, it's quite easy, Mark. We just do this, and this. So yeah, it's an exciting space. Hey, we're not making the claims that can do everything, but we kind of focus on that cognitive side of big ambitions, laser focus, and baby steps, to tell the truth. So we start delivering against the promise early.
So what's some of the use cases for Manu? I think we talk about and hear a lot about bots, but not really sure what it could do, where it could take us.
Yeah, so our first bot that we created there is around the news side. So the push-pull of information around the suppliers that you manage. Pulling it into, you go into a meeting and you pull the information through. But also in the morning, what are the 10 articles that you want to read on the way to work? And if there's 150 across the different suppliers, an algorithm needs to give you the 10 that you really want to read. Right. And can take you down the threads there as well. So that's been really exciting to do. But then we're creating a Visible bot on there. So for our customers, we have the context of their supplier relationships, and also the meetings they're having, and the activities that are going on, so we can push more in there. Well, also the discovery, finding new suppliers as well, so driving the insight through. But yeah, we're looking to actually build that as a platform. So if you want to approve a PO, a purchase order, whether that is on Oracle or Coupa, the natural language processing with a little piping of RESTful APIs should allow you to say, hey, which purchase orders do I need to approve if they haven't been reached to you, and you can review them and click them on a button on a very simple interface, rather than going into that lovely ERP system and go through. But I think the key thing also that is the security side. It needs to be enterprise security. So I don't think you look at Facebook and you look at some of the other platforms. I'm not sure large corporates are going to be really happy for that integration from ERP into Google and coming through. So I think that's what we've decided to do that. The other thing is you only have a certain amount of applications on your mobile phone. So that first page of applications is cool.
Yeah.
So if we can create a platform for procurement people and commercial people where they press one button and the natural language delights people and allows them to do everything, then we've solved it. And this is about solving problems.
Right.
We just created one bot for ourselves. Selfish, because then someone else is going to do the other one, and then the user has a bad experience. Let's try and make it simple. And I guess there's a little bit of collaboration that we need to build. So we're talking about a few other companies now to start building that in early next year as well. So exciting to see how that goes as well.
Awesome. No, it's interesting times afoot, and probably going in directions that we can't even truly conceptualize, because you're kind of bringing things in, experimenting with them, seeing what works, what doesn't work, iterating on it. But all I know is that disruption is coming our way. And
well, we should get another procurement bot on there as well. Right, it kind of triggers, and it takes you it plays it directly in the bot, or it takes you to iTunes or SoundCloud, and your dulcet tones come straight through. So
or maybe I'll have a bot that tells me what questions to ask, when to ask them, so I can sound a bit more intelligent.
Well, I think that's what some of the guys do on Slack. anyway, it's interesting, and we have to experiment.
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to do today was I've had a series of shows on value-based procurement, and I've talked with a number of thought leaders such as Joanna Martinez, Kate Vitasek, and Jordan Early. And so I wanted to continue that line of thinking today and talk about the shift from really reporting savings to generating broader business value, which is obviously, top of hearts and minds for procurement professionals right now. But what do you see as some of the key drivers to be able to do that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and it's a topic I kind of have a conversation I have most days, to tell the truth. Not so internally, but as I'm seeing customers and prospects as well. I think the biggest thing for procurement and for business is a mindset change. It's a little bit of moving away from the savings stuff, but also I guess procurement needs to stop reporting on the news and start becoming the news. I can drive their own agenda. And I think that's how do you drive a competitive business, and that goes beyond the bottom line savings side. But there's change that needs to come in there. You have to change the expectations with the finance team, with the R&D team, who they innovate and do all these parts. So, and it's an intersection. I speak to the team about it. It's the maturity of your business partnering on one axis, and it's the maturity of your supplier partnering on the other. And where do you start on that? The business partnering, if you don't have that side, then there's no pull and demand business. And if you try and push the amazing capabilities of suppliers, then you're quite often kind of pushed back by the business. So they're the two key things, I think, is the parts. And then just really the mindset and showing the new value that you create, and kind of getting new value chips that the business will recognize. Right. With finance as well. So we're doing some really interesting stuff on that, but that's some of the big parts. I think Peter Carlson, I'm not sure if he's done a session with you, the former CEO, Tesla guy. He had a great slide he showed at Procurement Leaders in May on his thesis of procurement. And, it's all about driving speed to the business. And then how do you handle the extended innovation network? I think he's nailed it. That's the future of procurement. But it's going to take a while. The early adopters, innovators are starting to invest both in that change of mindset and the partnering side, and bringing new value chips to the space. And if you can start unlocking the potential of your suppliers in their niche areas, and the business is willing to get beyond the not invented here side, then you're in a magical space. But the future enterprise is going to be slightly smaller. They're going to be more focused on their core capabilities. The external spend is going to increase as a percentage, and they're going to be a lot more reliant on the suppliers who have their focus as well. And they're going to be powered by smart applications, and there's going to be AI and cognitives and algorithms in there as well. So I'd say one thing as well is, how many data scientists do you have sitting in your procurement function? I think that's a really interesting sign as we go along, because you're going to have to create some of your own algorithms on top of your own data sets. And what are those algorithms that are going to make your business more competitive? And it's an interesting one. I'd like to see the algorithm of big pharma company, the algorithm of financial services company, which is around the procurement function and driving that now. That could be something they invest with a software provider that's going to stick it together. But there has to be something around the AI in there. But mindset change is the biggest part. And mindset's also making that investment into doing something different as well. And
so does the mindset shift start with procurement? So we got to understand what the potential of all this change is before we can even start educating the rest of the business on it. And we adopt it and recognize that it's probably for the greater good. It's not something to fear. I think it's, you have to start changing the mindset. And I think that's by doing it. So get on, just do it, as Nike would say. But again, that 70-20-10. If savings was our core, business partnering is 20% now, so everyone's increasing the stakeholder management. And then let's say supplier partnering in a true sense is your 10, and the innovation that comes through. That's probably the right thing. And if you can't get 10% of your resources focusing on the new stuff of innovation and maybe some of this technology part, then you're going to struggle to make the change. So still keep the core where your customers are, and that's around savings.
The business partnering allows you to focus that new value proposition coming through because you start getting the demand, and then 10%, and then you'll flip that on, more on supplier partnering coming through, and the savings starts getting a little bit smaller as you go along. But it's going to take time, hey. But there is a challenge. Disruption is happening in every single country and every single industry. So I say it's going to take time, but has your company got time? I can't really comment on that.
Right. And things tend to be happening, you talk about it taking time. And, in the procurement space, I think that's what we've seen is that it's not necessarily the availability of technology. It's more about not even a resistance to change, but just that it takes longer than what the technology should allow us to do things differently. But I wonder if things are changing so fast outside of the procurement space that we'll be kind of forced to change this time faster than what we've been forced to change in the past.
I think we will. But we're not seeing that. We're not seeing so many companies going under. Well, we're seeing Uber and these new ones coming up. Mm-hmm. I think it is happening. And I think there was a post someone said today, that the fastest way to actually change your organization is to turn off the email and Lotus Notes and SharePoint and turn on Slack and so forth. And It gives a shock to the system. But we're seeing it every day. Today, or this week, Emma Walmsley got the CEO role of GSK. Mm-hmm. So she'd come from L'Oreal, I think, running the consumer health side. So someone from consumer health running a pharmaceutical company, obviously having divisions, is a delight, both from the diversity side of seeing a female CEO for a global company, also the background. So I think that's a real sign from a big pharma company. Things are changing. I can't see that a head of consumer health is going to be running a pharmaceutical company in the same way as it has been for the years before.
So you're seeing more and more large organizations really bring in CPOs who are charged with thinking differently, of not just continuing the status quo and doing the same things that have been done before, but maybe a little bit better. They're really looking and thinking a little bit differently, which means it's coming from the top, which is what we really need to be able to impact any wide-scale change of the way that we do things.
Yeah, it's something drastic. I mean, Miguel from Nokia's presented a few events I've been to, and he's really rethinking about what procurement's proposition is around the innovation side. It's pretty extreme, but Nokia needs that change if you see the organization as well. So maybe that kind of forces it. But, we need some successes there. I think there's a new journey there. And again, you still have to protect that 70%. The business needs those savings, but we need to show the other parts coming through. So it's a progression. I know you've got an event called the Revolution. Mm-hmm. Is it a revolution? I think it should be. It's probably going to be an evolution of most countries.
And I think so as well. I think, it's funny, when we were thinking about the revolution and what do we call this event, we wanted to be a little bit provocative, but just to make... so that it stood out a little bit, so that people just start to think a little bit differently, and also see kind of the risk that if we do continue to just do things the same, technology is going to replace a lot of the things that we think is strategic today, plus all the tactical and transactional stuff. So there's a need just to change our value prop. But then if we were able to do that, actually, there's probably bigger opportunity for us than there is today in all the things that we're doing today, because we're bringing so much more value for the business. And also then it makes us accessible to companies that couldn't really justify the ROI in investing in strategic procurement because it was too expensive for them. So you're opening up a whole new kind of wave of organizations that suddenly can afford to do some of the things that we can do for the business.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see some of it. So we work with some tech companies on the West Coast and talking to others, but they're fast-growing organizations. They get to a point where actually they start getting loss of agility.
Yeah.
And then how do you, without too much structure, you have to come to. So the large companies are trying to get agility. The smaller ones are coming to the point where agility is there. So I think it's that point of how do you to manage some of the complexity that procurement is doing as well. But hey, look, the procurement is the single function that sits between the unmet needs and opportunities of the business, hopefully driven by amazing customer insight and these capabilities of the suppliers, both current and new. And it's a really exciting role, and we just have to make it as best we can and show the future for people.
When we return, you'll hear Mark's advice on how we in procurement can help our organizations start to think differently. But first, a word about today's sponsor. The Art of Procurement is brought to you by Denali. Denali is a procurement-focused, technology-agnostic, and highly efficient managed services provider. And as you may know, I bought and sold services similar to those that Denali provide during the course of my career. And in my experience, one of the key critical success factors of any procurement services engagement is culture, and cultural fit between a client and their service provider. So I wanted to hear from within Denali what their culture was based upon.
My name is John Bizzani. I'm a manager at Denali Sourcing Services, and I'm a global delivery lead on one of our large manufacturing clients. I think it's built very specifically on a few things. And one, I think you've probably heard us say we are procurement people, but that's a big part of our culture. I think focusing on procurement, focusing on how procurement partners with businesses and suppliers and the value that we drive is a big piece of our culture, and that's where we all start. There's another piece of it that we're a growing business, and we've really kept a lot of the early culture that was entrepreneurial and people feeling empowered to bring new ideas to the table. We've been able to keep that ingrained in our culture today. And the great thing about Denali is that those ideas are really valued by leadership and by all the team members. So people are encouraged to bring those ideas forward.
I then asked John, what is the one thing that's ingrained in the Denali culture that enables him and his colleagues to consistently build strong relationships with his clients?
I think the big thing for us is really hearing our clients. Hearing them allows you to really take that step back, look for the value that they're driving towards, and then see how you can supplement it and drive it even further than what they were targeting from the outset. So it's kind of goes back to being procurement focused and certainly having that thought process of what's going to be best for your procurement stakeholders, but again, realizing that the real benefit of procurement is being that shared service unto the rest of the business and driving value through through each of those departments, which are ultimately kind of the point of the business itself.
Denali, empowering their employees to create and deliver value-driven solutions that put client and stakeholder needs first. You know, you talked about the 70-20-10 and, 10 obviously being, some of those moonshots or some of the things that you're going to be investing in that may not pay dividends up front. Who makes the decision that they're actually going to invest in that 10%? Is it a procurement-led, or is it does it come from top down because they need to do things differently?
First way, there's never a failed project in a large corporate anyway, is there? So the 10% are never a failure. Right. So I guess that's cognitive dissonance. Mm-hmm. There's lots of failures going on there. I love reading books. There's a great one, Black Box Thinking, and it's about how you learn from failures and also success. A great book. Again, if you can get a guy, I think it was a guy who wrote Bounce as well. Black Box Thinking, awesome book. There are failures, and we just need to learn from those things. And if we don't, then we'll repeat them as well. So, people just have to take a percentage of the time or resource, and they have to invest in the new. Now, it doesn't mean they have to go out and do crazy stuff, but invest in new technology. It's not just the standard ERP modules all the way through. Companies are more willing to do proof of concepts, invest in some consultancy for change, and do that in smaller parts of the business. And I guess that's the biggest part. If you're going to do something new, you need to find a playground for it. It was either in one of the Google book or the Disney book about nurturing and protecting new ideas. So if you have a pilot, if you have a proof of concept, which could have a fundamental effect on the future, then you need to protect that idea as much as you can, and nurture it. And then, get your black box thinking. If it doesn't go completely right, it doesn't mean bin it. It may be tweak it and move it along as well. So
recognize you might not get it right the first time.
No, but if you just bin it on the first one, I think the other thing is a culture of failure. People talk about fail fast, and we don't mind failures. Big corporates don't like failing.
No, they don't like to waste money, or in their eyes, waste money.
Or just have any project that fails. So I think there is a mindset around failure, and if you look at the supplier partnering side in the innovation, not all of that kind of is going to hit. So it's it's an exciting new. That's like the West Coast. We just opened offices in San Francisco.
Right.
Still the Wild West for technology. This is where the new stuff's coming through, and the mindset of the people and the organization there, I think, is a little bit more open to innovation. That said, we're finding certain industries, pharma, really interested in changing. Maybe that's some of the pressures of the business model changing. But then you go into other very established ones as well, and sometimes we're blown away with the opportunities there as well. But the worm is turned, and Alex and myself spent quite a lot of time just really researching the space before we jumped in and started Old Street, and then doubled down on Visible as our first product as well.
Now, what's interesting, you talked about San Francisco, and I'm being in LA, I'm able to go up and down to San Francisco fairly often, and just the energy that's there with some of the tech firms. I was at an event fairly recently, which was a Silicon Valley Sourcing Leaders event, and it was just really interesting that the challenges that tech firms are having are very different challenges than what a more traditional company may have, and it's around sustaining growth and bringing innovation. And yes, they want to put some infrastructure in place to help manage costs, but cost isn't the number one thing. And so I almost see that the innovations that those companies are able to bring in terms of thinking differently about the suppliers will then become case studies that maybe more mature industries will be able to look at and say, actually, here's kind of, because a more mature company always wants a roadmap. So, here's how it's kind of been proved out. Now, these are all the steps I can follow to actually maybe mirror some of the things that some of the tech firms are doing when they're looking about working with suppliers in different ways.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to see some of the supply base. I only found out today. So obviously Twilio is one of the companies that IPO'd this year. And the biggest customer is WhatsApp.
Interesting.
You would think WhatsApp, now a Facebook company, right, be doing the whole stack, but they're reliant on a supplier to do, I think it's the authentication or checking the emails or something, but they're the biggest customer for Twilio. And I wouldn't expect that of a fast-growing company to have a supplier of that size. I'm not saying it's probably the biggest supplier of all, but they need the agility to grow and focus on the things that they do best as well. So they're happy to use Twilio for some of those parts. So I think we'll see that. You look at AWS, it's the infrastructure of most organizations. I mean, we see some companies from 5, 6, 7 years back, and they run their own servers. Well, they have to migrate. There's a big part on that. And then, the new companies like ourselves are built on microservices and all these things. So, 2 years in terms of technology can be a big timescale. So how do we keep up to date? How do we innovate with our partners and our customers? And I think that's what the new companies need to look at as well. So
what do you think that supplier relationships need to look like then when you're thinking about, you're talking about this whole ecosystem now that we're reliant on, whereas before it was maybe a little bit easier to delineate what each supplier did and how they fit. Now we're building organizations where we're completely reliant on our supply base. Yeah, and they'll shift their proposition and you shift yours. So I think it needs to do it. I think, which suppliers can you focus on? You can't focus on all of them. Yeah. You take the 10% rule and take the top 10%, or do you just take the top 10 suppliers and say, right, we are going to work more strategically with them? I think that's the first starting point for it. There is a bit of cognitive dissonance that most organizations believe they have some sort of supplier relationship management program in place, and I'm sure there's some great ones out there, but quite often the consultants come in, do their part, and that takes 9 months to transform all the category managers and the supplier management and the business leaders to do it. They get their Excel spreadsheets, they get the PowerPoint slides, they're obviously doing their quarterly reviews, performances in. Actually, it takes 6 months from then before there's very little left. So there is a challenge about scaling too quickly. I think it needs to be focused and understanding the value through. Otherwise, people will say, we tried that before and it failed. What does it feel like and look like? I think it's really starting looking at what the shared objectives are between two organizations. What are the goals and the benefits for both organizations? And that's not just going to be about savings. It's not going to be just about revenue and profit. What are the types of projects that you want to do which are going to drive the agenda forward? And there needs to be a level of trust in there as well, and openness of communications. Large organization is complex. It's kind of Jekyll and Hyde. One part's going over here and promising you
all this value, and then they're beating you up over there. Now, commercial side's always going to be in there, but we need to move a little bit away from the Jekyll and Hyde. So open communication. Also, when those ideas come through, we talked about nurturing the ideas and protecting them. There's also just making sure you get back to people and see that. So there's a systematic way to innovation and ideas and give them feedback. Otherwise, they just turn off or take it to a competitor or just stop doing it, and it becomes a transactional relationship, either one way or the other as well.
It's building trust. Basically, and building it over long term, not just expecting that, because I've been there where we've put in place so-called supplier relationship management programs. And I recall Alex saying something about the fact that that's just another way for you to, extract as much as you can out of that relationship. It truly isn't a two-way relationship. And you put those in, and then you expect that they're going to bear fruit within, 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something like that. The reality is it takes a long time to undo all the stuff that has gone before where we've operated in a one-way mode, but then build the trust so they're actually comfortable in sharing some of these things with you.
Yeah, and the other part is if you can do the supplier partnering fine, the business that come on that journey, but if you can't pull the key objectives from the different business units and be able to articulate that to the suppliers, and the internal business stakeholders are doing the same thing, it's very hard for the supplier to actually say, oh, this is what you're trying to achieve in there as well. So the business objectives, communicating them well, giving exposure to the business, and then that's a great way of telling the anecdotal stories of how you're driving competitive advantage to the business savings. And then you can start building that up in terms to kind of new value chips, which are measurable. I think you need to show your savings projects and your value projects. Value's a big word, but value to a pharmaceutical company may be reducing the times of clinical trials, or increasing the impact of marketing campaigns, or the contract sales approach by X. You might not save any money, but you have an effect which links with what the business objectives are. And that's what value is. But you have to speak about what the business needs are and then talk about how that supplier's helped. Otherwise, value will be kind of shot down by everyone, or what do you mean by value?
Right. And so, for example, in pharma, if you're able to do something which then increases or reduces the time, should I say, of being able to go to clinical trial, then that reduces the time of being able to patent and go to market, then you've bought yourself maybe another 6 months or 12 months of patent exclusivity. So it's just tying it to business events, basically. And folks will be able to derive a value from that, even if there isn't something monetarily. But I like the idea of, you got to show the cost savings first, because people still are always going to want that. But then maybe over time, as they see more value being driven, kind of the importance on cost goes down a little bit. The importance on value goes up a little bit, to a point where I don't know if it's the holy grail and whether it's realistic or not, but then value overtakes cost.
Yeah, and if it's kind of, if you start at 100% savings or commercial, and then it becomes, risk kind of goes in there, or agility comes through, then but you should be able to have a conversation with the CEO or the heads of the divisions and be able to articulate the value. And I think each category manager, I think it was one of the former heads of procurement and one of the big farmers told me, I said, each category manager should have a sales pitch to the business, and it should be the value beyond savings that they're talking about, the suppliers they're nurturing for the future, the innovations they're bringing. And by the way, we've got your cost base in hand as well. But again, think of that big long list of projects that you're working on. Maybe it starts at 100% or 90% savings focused, it becomes 80%. And you get your 70, 20, 10, and you start seeing that through. But you need to see that in the same view. And actually, the business needs to be involved in those projects as well. And I guess it comes into your yearly cycle. So it's interesting, but it has to be systematic. It's not just a bing bag approach. And it needs to be scalable. Otherwise, be back there in a year's time, licking your wounds, and you may not have a job anymore. So, yeah.
So where do you start from a supplier perspective? I think it's all about segmentation, as you mentioned before, and making, you can never do things like this with everybody, nor would you really want to. Are there some typical characteristics that you see amongst, the pilot programs, for example, that you would put in place to start having the business think differently about those relationships and trying to drive out innovation rather than focus on cost?
Yeah, start with the business need. That's the key thing. What's the objective of the business, and maybe it's a group of stakeholders rather than trying to do it across multiple parts of the business, because it gets complicated there. So start with the objective of the business and be able to articulate that. Very rarely is it savings alone, which is their core objective. It's market growth. It's impact in there, and they'll tell you that. There's another great book. Sorry, I read too much, but it's called The Phoenix Project. Mm-hmm. It talks about it's about an IT DevOps guy. I think his name's Bill. Anyway, the first half of the book he talks about, it's all about learning about the flow of works. So obviously agile kind of processes and the handoffs and so forth. And it's mental. I think it's called. I remember it's mental. He takes them to manufacturing plants and he shows how a manufacturing plants and shows how the flow works and where the blockers are and so forth and how you clear them. Second half of the book is even more interesting. I think it's something that the CPO should read. One of the other guys who's just been working on compliance piece all the time and causing pain in the business and adding no value. He forces Bill and himself to sit down with the CFO and ask what he really wants from them. And the CFO brings up his one piece of paper and he tells them all the things that he's after. Mm-hmm. Savings is not the big one, but it's about growth and all these other things and agility. And the two of them look at it and then they go back to all the kind of the ops, the tech ops and the compliance people, and they rethink about everything they're doing to drive that agenda. And it starts with the objectives of the business from the top to the senior management, and then you can articulate the value and you can put your resources around it. Savings is going to be part of that, and there is a drug called savings, and
it's hard for us to get away from that drug.
So that's still going to be there, but then you get those other objectives. So really understanding your internal customers, their objectives, and then delivering against it. So I think that's where you start. A focused stakeholder group with clear objectives, and then you start the partnering around those projects. And you don't overcommit to the supplier and what you're going to be able to do, but you show that from the interaction with the business stakeholders, the ideas they're bringing through. You protect, and you do it small, and then you grow it, and then you show the business, you show your own team that this is possible, and then you might have to bring some new people in as well to scale it. But
so those first projects and the first, you've formed your stakeholder group. You've identified maybe a couple of relationships that you really want to start focusing on. How do you convince the supplier that this time it's different? Trust me, and trust me, and you'll go far. I'm sure that most suppliers will turn around and say, "I've heard this before."
Well, I think most of them will, and then they'll probably give you another go.
Yeah.
I think sometimes you just have to sit down and listen to all the pains about your organization. Actually, sometimes bring an independent person in consultancy or just an individual to talk it through and facilitate as a core part. But there's going to be a lot of things that they either don't want to talk to you directly about. They might tick and give you a score on the survey that comes out every year and say everything's great, but there's underlying things that are painful. You have to listen. That's what Alex and myself did when we first set up the business. We kind of knew the procurement problem.
Yep.
But we went around a whole lot of suppliers for a few companies and just talked to them. The first hour was working out whether or not we worked for the company and not going to get in trouble. And they just let rip after that. So, it's really taking on board, taking a bit of a beating from the supplier and not overcommitting that you're going to be able to change all those things. I've seen some of these surveys that they go out yearly to the suppliers with about 140 different questions.
Right.
The expectation is that you're going to respond to each one of those. Actually, a simpler format is probably the key, which you can go back and you can actually commit on and say, we're going to focus on these key areas. So, I think it's that's how you sell it, and you find the individuals. It's all about people. It's all about people. We're selling internally, we're selling to suppliers, and we need to find the right advocates, the innovators and early adopters on both sides of the partnership paradigm.
It's funny how much a procurement really is selling, and you don't really think about that when you get into it. But that's essentially what we're doing. We're selling change. We're selling, ideas. We're selling why people would want to work with each other on both sides. There's far more selling in what we do than actually buying, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, well, I saw the CPO at Brose yesterday. He was in town at another event, and he was a sales guy before, so he used to beat up sales procurement before, and then he flipped over. They were saying actually there was kind of one meeting and he started changing his ways. And then he came into the procurement function to lead it. And he is one of the top CPOs. He's really making a change and really innovative individual, but he has got a sales ability to sell back to the business, understanding their objectives and being able to talk in their voice, but also sell to the suppliers and show the ability to take that idea through the business and realize it, and also give feedback as well, and do that in a systematic way. But it is definitely a sales skill, and it needs to be focused on both sides. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just looking up, and actually you need to embrace the capabilities to help you to deliver it as well. So I think you have to, you need 2 days with stakeholders, 2 days with suppliers, and 1 day with the team. That 2-2-1 approach.
So I know I got to start wrapping up in a minute, but I had something that was just interesting based on what you were just saying then, and so I was interesting for you to dish some dirt. What were some of the key things that suppliers would be saying about procurement? Were there any key themes, or was it just situational?
I think there's the Jekyll and Hyde. There's one case study from a few years ago, so it's not a fresh one, where and there's a risk around this at the moment. There's supplier innovation is been talked about a lot. I think it's a great thing, a huge competitive advantage alongside business partnering and supplier partnering. Innovation on its own supplier innovation on its own will end in a bad place if you don't have some part, because you're kind of promising that you're going to invest in the supplier, and you also need the business to be open and willing to take the innovation.
Right.
Yeah. But one company ran a innovation process, and there's 40 different suppliers involved. There was all this prototyping going on, a lot of investment. They had to stop the factory lines and so forth to get these concepts out. There was a pitcher. There's probably a bottle of champagne, and kind of 9 months later, the account manager's going, you committed that we were going to roll out this thing. Where's it gone? Actually, the whole team that had run that project had moved on and distributed around the business. Then they got their score at the end of the year, because they did the annual one but didn't do the quarterly QBRs, and they were scored 2 out of 5 for innovation or something like that. So I think that's the Jekyll and Hyde of it. It's not consistency. What they really like is they like the feedback. People like feedback. So quarterly business reviews are awesome. It keeps you aligned.
Yeah.
Set up what the relation looks like. We're on track. We know what the performance. These are the issues. Let's solve them together. Awesome. Yeah. We're going to try and make this. They keep coming up. We're going to solve them. And then it just clears out the way for driving value. But it's consistency. And there needs to be visibility on those activities and make sure they're done, because they're the first thing that gets dropped. And that means your business partnering is gone as well, because the executives aren't there as well. So it's consistency. It's also accepting that your teams change a lot as an organization. And then you've got your suppliers trying to work out who's now running the project, who's managing our relationship. Dave used to be over there, and now Jenny's running the relationship. It's understanding that you change. So how do you communicate better in terms of the changing place, which is always going to be in a corporate as well?
Yeah, demonstrating that it's a sustainable change. It's not based on one person who may just be an innovator in the way he thinks about supplier relationships. It's actually an organizational strategy, so that it gives them confidence to then, I guess, do things with a longer term view than still looking at it as being, well, what happens when category manager Joe moves on to the next thing in 18 months and I'm left with somebody who doesn't have those same ideals.
And it needs to be authentic.
Yeah.
Your partnership program needs to be authentic to your organization. And you need to be able to deliver on it. So that's why I'd say start with a small group of suppliers, be able to commit to what you do, so under commit rather than over promise, and then grow on that as well. So I think the suppliers are looking for it. I think as over the next few years, they're going to find some of their customers who are just amazing. And hopefully they can come and help teach some of their customers on how they can do it as well. But it'll take a bit of wind of change to see it progresses as well.
Well, Mark, I've got to leave it there for time reasons, but I just really thank you for joining me today on the Art of Procurement. And, if listeners would like to learn a little bit more, find out a bit more about Visible and Lucid, continue the conversation, where's the best place for them to find you and to find Old Street Labs?
If you search on Old Street Labs, I think in America you pronounce it Old Saint Labs, but
right.
ST
no
Labs.
street, yeah, it's the ST.
Otherwise, you're on all the different social media platforms as well. yeah, search for Alex Short or Mark Perera, and we'll come up on Google fairly quickly. And Invisible, which we misspell like most things, you'll find us there. But yeah, no, it'd be really good to talk to you today, and I'm looking forward to coming down to LA and catching up in person. And we'll have to do some video interviews and see how we can talk about the future a little bit more.
No, that sounds like a plan. I'm already counting down the days. No, it's beautiful out here, so you'll enjoy it, and we'll be able to do something by the ocean. So get yourself out of the city.
Sounds good. Well, thank you very much, and we'll catch up soon.
Yeah, all right. Thanks a lot, Mac. And something I just omitted to mention there is that I'm going to post the links to how to contact you and the Visible site and All Street Labs site. Those are going to be at artofprocurement.com/supplier value. That's artofprocurement.com/supplier value. All right. Thanks a lot, Mac.
And have a good day. Cheers. Then.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Art of Procurement. To find an archive of all past episodes, you can go to artofprocurement.com/episodes. And to ensure you never miss another show, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe.